let's finish up by talking a bit about customer expansion, customer success, because there is this virtuous cycle that wins turn into references, references turn into momentum, and momentum turns into scale. So how does the sales process scale up? Phase one, we've talked about a lot. The sales force is the CEO and the CTO or something like that. And your mission is to find product market fit. There's a second phase where you've got what you think is product market fit, but you need to make it better. And now you have a few more players involved. It's the CEO typically still involved, but you may have a key engineer or an applications guru. You may have a product manager who are actively involved in the conversation. You may have a sales leader at this point, not a sales organization. You have one salesperson who is starting to learn and is starting to help the CEO because you have enough deals going on that it's no longer logistically possible for the CEO to be the sole driver of every deal. So that's a level of expansion of the team, and it's a level of spreading and getting more experts involved in different dimensions of the process. And then as you mature, as you really have settled the formula, you start to apply the formula. You are now trying to stamp out and repeat this formula where you may now have a sales executive which has a sales organization, and this may be organized by geography, or it may be organized by customer type, enterprise sales versus small and medium business sales. It could be your Asia organization, your Europe organization, your North America organization. And you often have an applications and a support organization, which are not always, but quite often part of sales because of that virtuous cycle. You may have a real product management team that are experts on what the features and the roadmap are for the product. And you may, depending on the nature of the product, have a marketing and communications organization. In a company that's at an early stage just selling a small number of products, there's not a lot of media selling. It may be more of a trade show group than anything else. Maybe they help on a certain amount of collateral in the website. But in other organizations where there is a lot of reference selling, there may be a lot more positioning of the organization across different constituencies, both positioning the product to people who might buy it and positioning the company for decision makers and ultimately for some hypothetical future acquisition or IPO. But it takes time to go through these things. How long it takes is a function of how good it is, how good your product market fit is, and how good you are at refining it and systematizing it and finding a way to do it, and what the nature of the customer base is. If you have a formula for product market fit and it allows you to sell to every major cell phone maker on the planet and no one else, there's not that many cell phone makers on the planet. So you don't need a huge sales organization. You have to have people who are specialists at those particular places. On the other hand, if you're expecting to do tens of transactions a quarter, hundreds of transactions a year, you may need a pretty significant organization as you scale up. I wanted to say a word about the care and feeding of a sales organization. This doesn't happen at day one, but sales organizations have a unique culture that it's worth understanding if you haven't been part of a sales organization before. It's a performance culture. It's about winning in a very overt sense. It's about making the number that the leadership and the sales, the leadership of the organization, the leadership of the company are creating a number. What is it that we need to book or close next quarter, next year. And that becomes a holy objective for the sales organization. And it creates a kind of strong warrior brotherhood and sisterhood, which is often based on only we know how to deal with customers. And sometimes a little bit of the rest of the company doesn't get it. They would be completely lost without us. We are the few, the proud, the sales organization. There's typically a very tight partnership between the salespeople and the applications engineers or the system engineers, because this is really a team, somebody who knows the product really well and somebody who knows relationship dynamics really well. And the they bond quite closely, and having top quality people who are compatible with one another in those sales and applications teams makes a big difference. There is a strong tendency for the salespeople to take on such a role of advocacy on behalf of the customer's interests that you often wonder whether they're working for you or working for the customer. And it can lead to some internal conflicts because the salespeople may be doing things which are, at least if scaled up, detrimental to the company in their belief that it's so important to serve the customer. So, you got to pay some attention to this. But in that role of advocate, and because of that do what it takes kind of culture, you will find that people get very creative, at least in figuring out, how do they bypass, the normal channels of information flow to find out more about, what's really going on with the product and what really are the delivery dates. And sometimes we'll be pulling people out of engineering or out of the product organization that the leadership didn't know were getting engaged with this customer. And they will strongly advocate saying things like, if we lose this customer, if we don't concede this point, we will lose this customer. And if we lose this customer, it will be a domino effect, and we will lose every other customer, and we will go out of business. So make a concession on this one small point. It's kind of classic selling internally, convincing the internal organization what they need to do. And so you've got to be aware of that aggressive advocacy and resourcefulness. You want very resourceful salespeople, and almost all the time it's working for the benefit of the company. But there are some things that can drive the rest of the company crazy about sales behavior. So the salespeople are always ready to negotiate with management and other organizations in support of the number, and in particular in support of their particular goal with a particular customer. And sometimes they're working on customer A this quarter, and it's all about this customer, and they get that customer closed. And next quarter, it's as if customer A never existed. And it's all about, we have to do this amazing, special, never before thing for customer B. And so they're able to use a full suite of tools. Salespeople are very smart, very empathetic, very committed, and they are able to deploy all of their intellectual and emotional tools to elate or panic other teams in the organization for pursuit of their goal. And we hire them in part because they have those tools. They get things done, and we love that. But we also have to put up with sometimes a level of drama that we would not tolerate, say, in the engineering organization. It's also great to have comfortable negotiators on your team, people who are really experienced at this, people who have done a lot of listening in the past and understand the value of listening and can hear things that sometimes you, as a non-salesperson, CEO, or leader, weren't hearing. So you 99% of the time you love your sales organization, and 1% of the time they drive you crazy. A few thoughts on subjects. Going international is something that is often really important to to enterprise businesses because similar profiles of customer do exist around the world. Now, the details may be different. There may not be somebody that looks like Meta in Europe or somebody that looks like AWS in Japan, but there are, in fact, similar needs, similar pain, similar stories. Sometimes you start selling internationally from day one. Sometimes, particularly if there is meaningful differences from geography to geography, you start in your home base. If you're a European company, you understand Europe, you have access to Europe more easily, you make your first success in Europe or in North America or in Asia. And then you figure out how to translate that success. What is the analogous value? Usually you need to wait until you have pretty high confidence in the product market fit, and then you can map how the product needs to change, if at all, how the market is different, because there are real cultural and stylistic differences in how you engage. And these are just my personal observation. It feels to me like Japan cares a great deal about lasting partnership built on deep commitment by the vendor to the customer success. So you need to go in at a point where you are willing to love your customer to death, that you're willing to devote potentially enormous resources throughout the organization to customer success, because the Japanese customer just naturally expects that. That's what they get from their vendors. On the flip side, you can go to a Japanese customer once you've established that and say, I've got a problem here. I'm having trouble with this. I need you to do this thing for me because this is really important to my success. And they are amazingly willing to find ways to help solve your problem. In China, by contrast, I find that the timescales that people think about are often much shorter. Yes, because engineering in China does seem to move pretty fast. They do seem to be interested in taking rapid but perhaps smaller steps with less of a 5-year technology roadmap and more of a I need to have this product in the market in 7 months point of view. And you need to therefore operate at this accelerated time scale, even if you are making smaller steps along the way to get there. Now, both of these are overgeneralizations. When I was dealing, for example, with Huawei in China, they looked more like a Japanese or a Korean company in terms of scale and in terms of wanting to take the big picture. But there were plenty of other, for example, semiconductor companies in China that when they talked about their product planning horizon, they said, well, we're going to be releasing this product in 2 weeks and its follow-on is due out in 6 months. But so I need to adopt your product now to incorporate it into my chip that I'm taping out in 2 months and am launching in 4 months. Just unprecedentedly short time horizons. Made you wonder how they could do it. You have lots of choices to make about whether your international operation is really operating from your home base, that you think of it as just another state in the US or another country in Europe, or you really are setting up a distribution partner, very common in Japan, or you're setting up your own subsidiary. In fact, in the case of Tensilica, our very first sales office outside of headquarters was our Tensilica KK office in Shin-Yokohama. So we decided that Japan was going to be important enough to us that our first field team, not people just sitting next to me as CEO, was going to be in Japan, and we built up a significant organization. And we had a ton of success in Japan over time as a result of that commitment, because they saw that we were building to be part of a lasting partnership. And they were able to overlook the fact that we were this tiny little startup with very little revenue and build a quite deep relationship with some of the biggest electronics companies in Japan. So it takes some commitment, some mutual commitment to get there. In any case, as a leader of a startup, get ready to book some travel. You're going to have to go there. You're going to have to talk and listen and see what's different about those problems and those customers. Yes, there is some localization. Um, I found in practice, there, yes, you want to go multilingual on your websites and have regional sales. You often need to have regional support staff even before you have regional sales. Contracts don't change very much. You can usually deal with insisting that the contracts be done on a U.S. jurisdiction in English, and that most big international companies know how to do contracts in English for the US at least. I'm less familiar with any nuances for Asia-based or Europe-based companies, but I would say that doing contracts in English is probably the common denominator. So, what are the key takeaways? I think number zero is always shut up and listen, particularly at the beginning before you know anything. Um, Great companies start from a clear understanding of a set of customer situations. You understand their needs. It may not be everything about the customer, but for this one situation, you really have a picture of what are they doing, why is it painful, where do they want to get to, what are their alternatives for alleviating that pain. There is an element of storytelling. Yes, you are listening, but then you take what you're learning in those stories and you reflect that back in clear and emotionally resonant stories that get at both how you technically are going to solve the problem and how emotionally this relationship is going to be durable. B2B and B2C are different. I'm talking mostly here about B2B, and there are lots of other people who can help you on things that are purely B2C. I'm not the person to ask in terms of, how do you do SEO, and how do you generate more traffic to your website, and how do you get your app on in the App Store up into the top 10. If I, from my own experience, I would say it's a lot of annoying ads that make things happen. Um, Contracts are there not just to write down the price and the deliverables. It's very much about enumerating what happens in all of the low probability situations. What are the detailed rights, expectations? What happens if things go wrong? Sales, particularly B2B sales, is all about relationships. These are not transactions. Yes, the transactions are the things that actually bring in the money, but what you want is a series of transactions, a pattern of transactions, a network of transactions that make each sale easier than the one before. So communicating with customers is key, and it's key both on a tactical basis. How did I move this deal down the funnel? And strategic. How did I establish a trustworthy relationship that will last me for years? And finally, salespeople are wonderful. Sales organizations have special dynamics. They don't look like other organizations in many ways. They have great spirit. They have great drive, but you need to understand how to make them successful and to drive them, use their strengths, mitigate their weaknesses to get things done. So that's my story about selling. I have lots of war stories I could be telling. There's lots of people who love to write about this. because salespeople are great communicators. So the thing that they love to do is tell people, other people, how to do sales. So um, and it seems that they love to buy books. So there are thousands of how to sell books out there, and thousands of ideas about how to do enterprise software or how to do deep tech selling or how to do AI selling that are coming into existence. So if you're interested in this, there is an overwhelming number of choices about how to learn about it.